to the point of the war ending, let's move on to your piece that you wrote in Haaretz yesterday. Again, we're joined here by Amir Tibon, columnist for the Israeli newspaper, as well as Dave Smith. So we can put up D1. This is your column yesterday, where you and in the past when we've had you on and you've made predictions that Trump or Witkoff were making particular strategic mistakes, your predictions have very unfortunately borne out and been accurate. And so now you're warning again here that Trump is misunderstanding Netanyahu and making a mistake in, if people have seen it, Dave, I'm sure you've seen these, Trump sending these long love letters to Netanyahu and basically berating the Israeli judiciary, threatening to withhold U.S., implicitly threatening to withhold U.S. funding if the judges don't drop all of these different corruption charges against Netanyahu, which presumably Trump thinks is some obstacle to Netanyahu reaching a deal, which maybe in his mind they are. Tell us, what is Trump thinking, and why do you think this is wrong?
So first of all, Ryan, I can't say with 100% certainty what is Trump thinking, but I can look at his actions and maybe try to understand. So he got the Iran war done right after those 12 days. He got a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. There was that moment where Netanyahu wanted to send more planes over there, and he stopped them mid-level. I don't know, maybe now the pilots need to have Truth Social, installed in those F-35 so that they know what they're doing. And then everybody expected him to move to Gaza, because I want to remind you, a month and a half ago, when we had that separate U.S.-Hamas-Qatar deal to release Idan Alexander, the Israeli-American hostage, the lone soldier who was taken by Hamas, at the time, Trump already wrote on Truth Social that it's time to end this brutal war. Okay, it's a quote that he used. That was a month and a half ago. But suddenly now, instead of putting everything on Gaza, we're seeing him pushing instead to cancel Netanyahu's criminal trial. 2 lengthy, angry posts on this issue within 48 hours. So what some people are saying is, there's an obvious linkage here. He wants the Netanyahu trial to be canceled, or at least to show Netanyahu that he's batting hard for him. And then in return, Netanyahu will give him what he wants on Gaza. But again, there are several problems with this. First of all, the mechanism for ending the Netanyahu trial runs through some kind of a plea agreement between him and the prosecution. And up until now, the prosecution has said, okay, we can erase all the charges against Netanyahu, but he needs to admit that he did something wrong, because that's usually part of a plea agreement. And he needs to be retiring from his position of power so that he cannot do corrupt actions again in the future. And Netanyahu refuses completely. I don't see how Trump's intervention can change that. And he can put threats. And I by the way, I understood his threat not specifically to take military aid from Israel, but maybe to put sanctions on the prosecution in Israel and on the judges, and basically do something that would hurt them personally. But even that, I don't think would help, because you would see strong pushback against that in Israel. Trump is very popular in Israel after what happened in Iran, especially. He's seen as the savior who came to help Israel against the Iranian nuclear threat. But you can throw a lot of appreciation and goodwill away if you're seen as someone who's meddling in the internal affairs of the country and trying to impose judicial outcomes on something that's really none of any other country's business. So that's one issue. The second issue is that the real obstacle to a deal in Gaza, a deal to bring back all the hostages and end the war, is not the Netanyahu trial. There's just no connection between the two things. The real obstacle has been all along that Netanyahu doesn't agree to end the war. And that's fundamentally what Hamas are saying they will demand in order to release all the hostages. And a lot of military pressure and a lot of death and destruction in Gaza so far has not changed their demand. We're 632 days into this nightmare. And we already had an agreement in place, right? The agreement in January that Trump and Witkoff, together with the last breath of the Biden administration, they brought together. But I give most of the credit to Trump and Witkoff, because the Biden team was working on this for months and they got nothing, really. Suddenly Witkoff emerged and boom, it was done. That deal it had everything spelled out already. You know, first phase, 33 hostages, 1,000 Palestinian prisoners, partial Israeli withdrawal, more aid coming into Gaza. All of that was successfully implemented in February and the beginning of March. But then Netanyahu invented new parameters for the agreement, walked away from what he signed, and he said, no, I want a partial ceasefire, partial withdrawal, only some of the hostages come back. And that's when it all fell apart. Oh, it's going to be 4 months soon, because time is passing and people are dying and the suffering is continuing. And that's the fundamental problem. It's not about Netanyahu's trial. It's not about Iran. It's about one question. Can Trump convince Netanyahu to stop the war? That's it. And so far, with all the talk and all the grandeur, and there was a Trump tweet the other day about, you know, take the Gaza deal, get the hostages. The real question is, will there be any pressure from Trump to make this happen? And it's binary, you know, 1 or 0. That's what it will take.
Did you feel like, you mentioned the Witkoff deal that he got through during Joe Biden's lame duck, which I agree with you, certainly seems that, yes, the Biden administration had this deal on the table, I think, since May of 2024, and then it doesn't happen until Witkoff comes in. From all the reporting that I read about that, it does seem like they were putting some pressure on the Netanyahu government. And it seems one of the things that's kind of bizarre about this whole thing from the American perspective is that Donald Trump, you know, if any country was imposing this albatross around his neck that Israel is, and he politically wanted to get this thing done, and he was funding the thing, you know, we'd see him insulting them, threatening to pull the funding. It seems like very easy, theoretically, for America to put pressure on Israel since they are funding and arming this campaign. And yet in this case, it just seems like that there was a little bit of pressure that Witkoff put on Netanyahu at the very beginning, and now there is this inability to do that. It's something that's kind of fascinating to me, and I think a lot of other Americans. Of course, we've seen Benjamin Netanyahu on secret recordings bragging about how he can move America in the past. What's your perspective on that? Is his administration concerned about this pressure, or do they feel like they can get what they want?
I think that when Witkoff came to the region right before Trump's inauguration, everybody had one mission on their mind, which was, don't get this guy's boss angry at you. And Witkoff played that card very smartly. He played it with Qatar, he played it with Egypt, he played it with Israel. And from Hamas's perspective, I think they were willing to go along with Trump and not with Biden, because they said, okay, there's a risk here, because the mechanism of the agreement always included a loophole through which Netanyahu could break the deal and renew the war. But they said, if we do it with Biden, you know, in a few months we get Trump, and then who knows what happens. But Witkoff, this is Trump's guy. So if this is an agreement that he is responsible for, there's a bigger likelihood that this won't happen. And then it did happen. And now the question again is, you know, does Trump want this war to end enough to use his leverage? And by the way, I don't think he needs to put any kind of threats like the ones that you hinted at. I think his popularity in Israel, especially now at this moment, you know, just a public call to do it would pretty much be enough. And it would actually help Netanyahu in a sense, because Netanyahu could come and say, well, you know what? We didn't achieve all of the goals in the war, supposedly, but President Trump is asking us, and look what he just did for us in Iran. So it wouldn't even take a lot, because, you know, there is a political price to pay. If Trump said, you know, I'm going to go to a great lengths to get the ceasefire and have a full-on confrontation with Netanyahu, and I think he would emerge victorious from a confrontation like that. I really do. But right now, it would even require less than that. So why isn't he doing? Honestly, I don't have the answer. And maybe in the next few days, we'll see something change, right? Ron Dermer, Netanyahu's closest aide, is in Washington right now. He's going to have meetings in the White House. There was a meeting over the weekend between Marco Rubio and the families of some of the Israeli hostages, and the families are pushing for this. Right, the families are basically saying, we want the war over. We don't want another partial deal, 5 hostages there, 3 hostages in 3 months. We want everybody released. The war is over. It's done. But the question is, what is Trump going to do? And I guess that's, always the unknown territory.
So the war is over if Trump wants it, is the bottom line. Amir Tibon, a columnist at Haaretz, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Let's hope for good news.
Yeah, let's.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.